Before the summer of 1988, the Carr family lived an idyllic life in the quiet town of Alturas, Florida. Their days were marked by peace, harmony, and unwavering faith. Every Sunday, they attended church, embodying the picture-perfect family in a community where everyone knew each other. But that tranquility was violently shattered on June 14th, when 16-year-old Dwayne stumbled upon a menacing letter in their mailbox. The anonymous note was stark and chilling, demanding the family leave Florida or face deadly consequences. The words were a sinister warning that left them shaken to their core. Dwayne, in disbelief, rushed to show his parents. Peggy, his mother, was immediately gripped by fear, while his father, Allen, dismissed the note as nothing more than a cruel prank. Little did they know this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would change their lives forever. As the summer bled into fall, the family's unease grew, feeding an ever-present tension. Then, on October 23rd, something unimaginable occurred. Peggy, who had always been vibrant and healthy, suddenly fell gravely ill. Stricken with nausea and excruciating pain, her once lush hair began to fall out in alarming clumps. Despite the severity of her symptoms, Lynn refused to take her to the hospital, convinced it was just a temporary illness. But as the days wore on, Peggy's condition worsened. Within a week, she slipped into a coma, and the family's worst fears began to materialize. To their horror, Dwayne began exhibiting the same terrifying symptoms as his mother. The situation escalated quickly, and soon a police investigation was launched. On December 2nd, authorities uncovered a shocking truth. The Carr family's sickness was no accident. They had been poisoned with thallium, a deadly chemical often found in rat poison. Toxicology reports revealed that every member of the family, including Lynn, had dangerously high levels of the poison in their systems. The chilling discovery left them reeling. The anonymous letter was no prank. It was a deadly warning, and someone was targeting them. The race to uncover the perpetrator had begun, and with each passing hour, the stakes grew higher. In 1988, 16-year-old Dwayne was living a carefree life in Alturas, a town where life was slow and peaceful. His mother, Peggy, worked as a waitress at the local diner, having raised 3 children on her own before finding love with Carr. Together, they formed a blended family, adding 2 more children to their household. Alturas seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. A quiet town where doors were never locked, and neighbors were like family. But everything changed on October 23rd, a day that would haunt them forever. In the early hours of that fateful morning, Peggy left for work at the diner, as she did every day. But soon after arriving, she began to feel a sharp, burning sensation in her legs and feet, followed by excruciating chest pain. Within hours, she was rushed to the hospital, barely able to stand. Doctors, baffled by her symptoms, ran extensive tests but couldn't find a diagnosis. They sent her home with painkillers, assuming it was some passing illness. But Peggy's condition only worsened. A week later, on October 30th, the nightmare took a darker turn. The pain was unbearable. Peggy, Dwayne, and his stepbrother, Travis, were all rushed to the hospital, each suffering from the same mysterious symptoms. The agony left them in tears, fearing they might not survive. Peggy was immediately admitted to the intensive care unit, where an infectious disease specialist made a shocking observation. Her hair was falling out in clumps, a telltale sign of possible poisoning. With mounting concern, he ordered a test for thallium, a deadly poison that had been banned in the US in 1972, but was still found in old rat poison. The results were nothing short of horrifying. Peggy had 50 times the lethal amount of thallium in her system. The next day, on October 31st, she fell into a coma. Travis was put on a respirator, and Dwayne showed no signs of improvement. With time running out, the police launched an urgent investigation. Their mission was clear: find the source of the poisoning and prevent further harm to anyone else. They scoured the local orange groves, tested the neighborhood's water supply, and even examined the diner where Peggy worked. But no traces of thallium could be found. As the community's fear began to rise, panic spread like wildfire. People were desperate for answers, and investigators intensified their efforts. They combed through the Carr family home, meticulously collecting dust samples and gathering over 400 household items for lab analysis. One item, however, raised a red flag: a six-pack of Coke bottles, 3 of which were still unopened. The tests on the bottles were chilling. Each contained more than a gram of thallium, enough to kill an adult. The detective leading the investigation immediately realized there were only 2 possible scenarios. The first, product tampering at the Coca-Cola factory. If that were the case, how many others might have unknowingly consumed the deadly poison? The implications were staggering. The contamination could have spread far beyond Alturas, possibly affecting the entire state or even the nation. Panic gripped the locals, and soon no one dared drink a bottle of Coke. The focus of the investigation quickly shifted to the bottling company, but with Coca-Cola's full cooperation, large-scale tampering was ruled out. It was physically impossible for the poison to have been introduced at the plant. This revelation led investigators to a chilling conclusion: the poisoning wasn't an accident. It was a targeted attack on Peggy and her family. And now the focus turned inward. All eyes were on the Carr family, with Peggy's husband, Parry-Allen, emerging as a primary suspect. Though he and Peggy had only been married for 7 months, their honeymoon phase had been brief. Parry-Allen worked long hours at the mine, and Peggy had grown increasingly suspicious. One night, she discovered him with another woman. But that wasn't the only cause for concern. On the weekend Peggy first fell ill, Parry-Allen had been conveniently out of town. Upon his return, he resisted taking her to the hospital. As the investigation dug deeper into Parry-Allen's background, they searched for any motive that might explain why he would poison his wife. But despite his questionable actions, one question lingered in the minds of investigators. Why would Parry-Allen poison his own son, Travis? That question lingered in the minds of investigators as they delved deeper into the case. During his interrogation, Parry-Allen dropped a puzzling clue. On June 14th, 4 months before Peggy fell ill, Dwayne had found a strange letter in their mailbox. The letter contained a yellow post-it with a chilling typewritten message: "Leave Florida within 2 weeks or face death." At first, Dwayne and his siblings had laughed it off, but now Parry-Allen's dismissive reactions seemed far more suspicious. Little did they know this wouldn't be the first ominous event to cast a dark shadow over the Carr household. The police soon uncovered a disturbing pattern. A few years earlier, 2 of the family's dogs had died suddenly, both displaying symptoms of severe illness and hair loss. The timing and circumstances raised a terrifying possibility. Could the dogs have been used for experimentation? As Peggy's health deteriorated and Dwayne and Travis showed no signs of improvement, the entire Carr family was tested for thallium. The results were nothing short of shocking. Every member of the household, including Parry-Allen, had traces of thallium in their system. This new evidence cleared Parry-Allen as a suspect, as it seemed highly unlikely that someone with the knowledge to commit such a crime would risk poisoning themselves. Even Peggy's 2-year-old granddaughter, Casey, showed traces of the deadly chemical. On March 3, 1989, after months of suffering, Peggy's condition reached its tragic conclusion. Dwayne was called to her bedside for the final time as the family faced the heart-wrenching decision to remove her from life support. Peggy Carr passed away at the age of 41, leaving her family devastated and reeling from the loss. With Peggy's death, the case officially became a murder investigation. Poisoning, a rare and methodical form of murder, is often carried out by someone with a dark, twisted genius, a mind capable of such a cold, calculated act. The FBI's examination of the contaminated Coke bottles revealed something unsettling: tiny scratch marks on the caps. The bottles had been tampered with, thallium had been added, the caps resealed, and the bottles appeared untouched. The poison, tasteless and odorless, dissolved seamlessly into the soda without causing the typical signs of contamination like overflow or discoloration. This sophistication pointed to someone with advanced knowledge of chemistry, someone who believed they were too clever to get caught. As the investigation expanded, police began questioning neighbors and townspeople. Alturas, a small town with only a few hundred residents, saw each and every person interviewed in the search for the perpetrator. The closest neighbors to the Carr family were George Trapal and his wife Diana. When detectives spoke to Trapal, his reaction was anything but ordinary. He lashed out in a tirade about the redneck children and their family. When asked why anyone would want to poison the Carr family, Trapal's response was eerily specific. Someone wanted them to leave. This detail, one that only law enforcement knew, was a chilling echo of the threatening letter received by the Carrs. This unsettling response made George Trapal a prime suspect. Further investigation into the Trapal family revealed something even more disturbing. George Trapal was a self-taught chemist, and his wife, Diana, held a master's degree in chemistry. Both were members of an elite society reserved for individuals with IQs in the top 2% of the population. The pieces were falling into place, and the investigators now found themselves facing a chilling realization. The person behind this calculated poisoning was far more dangerous than anyone had initially suspected. Digging deeper into George Trapal's past, investigators uncovered a shocking criminal background. Trapal had served time in prison as the chemist behind a major methamphetamine operation. One of the key ingredients in meth production, thallium. The revelation that Trapal was tied to a drug operation and had a history with dangerous chemicals brought him squarely into the spotlight as a prime suspect. For Peggy's son, Dwayne, the news was a bitter shock. He couldn't fathom that Trapal, a man he had known, could be capable of such a heinous act. Further investigation revealed another disturbing detail. Trapal had clashed with the Carr family over loud music not long before Peggy's poisoning. Just 48 hours after this confrontation, Peggy had fallen ill. Despite these mounting connections, the police were still lacking the solid proof needed to arrest Trapal. Under normal circumstances, investigators would bring a suspect in for questioning, hoping for a confession. However, detectives knew this strategy wouldn't work with someone like Trapal. He was introverted, non-confrontational, and unlikely to break under pressure. The FBI, therefore, proposed an entirely different approach: to outsmart Trapal through an undercover operation. Special Agent Susan Gorick was tasked with infiltrating Trapal's circle, gaining his trust, and gathering the evidence needed to prove his involvement in the poisoning. At first, the plan seemed simple enough. Susan would go undercover for just a weekend. But she was quickly warned about Trapal's sharp memory. If he saw her, he might remember her face or even her car, making it all the more crucial to remain undetected. Taking on the alias Sherry Gwynn, Susan transformed into a woman on the verge of divorcing her abusive husband. On April 14th, 1989, she made her way to the local hotel where the event would take place. When Susan arrived, she was greeted by none other than George Trapal himself. Face to face with the man suspected of poisoning Peggy, Susan's heart raced. Her greatest fear was that he might recognize her from prior surveillance. She took a deep breath, scanning his face for any sign of recognition. But nothing. Trapal appeared unaware of her true identity. Still, Susan knew she couldn't let her guard down. Trapel wasn't the type to confront his victims head-on. He was the kind of person who would quietly poison them, causing a slow, agonizing death. The risk was immense, but Susan had no choice but to press on. As Sherry Gwynn, she registered for the event and received a packet with the weekend's itinerary, which had been prepared by none other than Trapel. The pamphlet included several detailed murder mystery scenarios, one of which eerily involved poisoning. One particular paragraph stood out. It advised that when a death threat arrives on your doorstep, prudent people throw out all their food and monitor what they eat. The advice struck Susan as strikingly similar to the warning the Carr family had received before Peggy's poisoning. This unsettling parallel confirmed in Susan's mind that she was on the right track. Throughout the weekend, Susan kept a close eye on Trapel, engaging him in conversation, carefully monitoring every word. One slip-up could be fatal. When Trapel inquired about her background, Susan fabricated a story about her fictional husband, a lawyer from Houston, and how she had left him. Trapel responded with a chilling statement. He claimed he could tell when someone was lying by the way their neck muscles moved, sending a shiver down Susan's spine. But as the weekend wore on, she found a crucial breakthrough. Susan confided in Trapel that she planned to move to Florida to escape her abusive husband. Trapel's response was revealing. He casually mentioned that he and his wife were considering relocating and selling their house. After consulting with her supervisors, Detective Susan was instructed to extend her undercover operation beyond the weekend. The stakes had just been raised, and the trail to uncovering the truth about Peggy Carr's poisoning was now closer than ever. Susan knew that this extended mission was her last, best chance to gather the crucial evidence that would secure a search warrant for Trapel's house. She was determined to find something: lab equipment, chemicals, or any piece of evidence that would directly link George Trapel to the poisoning. The following week, Susan visited Trapel's home, keeping up the Sherry Gwynn persona. During the tour, Trapel boasted about the safety of Alturas, casually mentioning that no one locked their doors. But despite noticing several suspicious items, like a secret passageway in the library and a mannequin adorned with bondage gear, Susan knew none of these could be used to secure a search warrant. Though her initial plan had failed, Susan remained determined. She understood the risks involved. Revealing her true identity could put her and her family in immediate danger. Trapel was highly intelligent and had proven that he wasn't afraid to kill or harm those who got too close. Over the next several months, Susan continued meeting with him for a series of lunch dates, always under surveillance. She was meticulous in her caution, never eating or drinking anything once she left the table, always paranoid that Trapel might try to poison her, just as he had with Peggy. During these meetings, Trapel slowly revealed his deep disdain for anyone he considered intellectually inferior. His words gave Susan disturbing insight into his mindset. Despite these small revelations, after 8 months of gathering evidence, Susan was no closer to making a solid case. Her supervisors began to question whether the operation was worth continuing. The pressure mounted, and the operation faced the risk of being shut down. For Susan, failure was not an option. She was driven by a need for justice, for Peggy Carr, for her family, and for herself. Every day she imagined how it could have been her loved ones drinking that poisoned Coke. Then, in December 1989, Susan received the breakthrough she had been waiting for. George and Diana Trapel had moved out of town and, surprisingly, offered Sherry Gwynn the chance to move into their home. This gave Susan the legal right to enter the house and invite the county crime scene unit to conduct a full investigation. With this new permission, the team focused on places where thallium could have left traces: air conditioning filters, drains, and any overlooked corners. The house was still filled with Trapel's personal belongings, which meant there were plenty of opportunities to collect vital samples. In the garage, investigators found vials and chemistry bottles, potentially filled with chemicals that could test positive for thallium. As they awaited results from the FBI lab, Susan remained in her role as Sherry Gwynn. But the days dragged on and her patience wore thin. She had exhausted all avenues for engaging Trapel directly, and the risk of time running out was growing with each passing day. By January 1990, with no results from the lab yet, Susan knew she had to take matters into her own hands. She decided to try and trick Trapel into incriminating himself. However, what she didn't realize was that Trapel was also preparing his own trap for her. Susan arranged a critical meeting with Trapel at a picnic area behind a McDonald's in Sebring, the town where he had been living. The meeting would be recorded, an attempt to finally catch the man behind the poisoning and bring him to justice. During their tense conversation, Susan handed George Trapel a business card, claiming it was left by detectives who were searching for him. Trapel's demeanor shifted dramatically. His once composed exterior cracked as he became visibly nervous, trying desperately to maintain his composure. He repeatedly invited Susan to visit his new house, but she refused. What might have happened if she had agreed to go? The unease between them was palpable. After the meeting, Trapel walked away, clearly shaken, his nerves frayed by the information Susan had just dropped. This encounter marked a critical turning point in the investigation. Then, on April 4th, 1990, Susan received an unexpected call from the FBI. The thallium they had found in one of the vials from Trapel's garage was a match. Thallium nitrate, the same compound used in the poisoning of Peggy Carr and her family. This discovery was the breakthrough they had desperately needed. The very next day, April 5th, George Trapel was arrested at his new home in Sebring. The sight of him being escorted into the county jail in an orange jumpsuit marked the end of a long, dangerous investigation. The same man Susan had spent months pretending to trust was now being held accountable for his gruesome crimes. Even when confronted with the truth about her identity, George Trapel remained disturbingly unfazed. Susan, now revealing herself as a special agent from the county sheriff's office, served him with a warrant for handwriting samples. His response was chillingly casual. "Oh, okay." However, Susan had narrowly avoided becoming Trapel's next victim. When police searched Trapel's new home in Sebring, they made a shocking discovery. Behind a pegboard, they uncovered a hidden room with no inside door handle and a sealed, soundproof window. Inside was a platform bed with wooden stirrups and a pulley system, a bed designed for torture. The horror of what could have happened if Susan had visited his home was chilling. As George Trapel's trial began in January 1991, the jury was presented with overwhelming evidence. Among the items found in his house was a journal titled General Poisoning Guides, which specifically recommended thallium as the poison of choice for criminals. The journal also contained references to getting rid of neighbors, and 55 fingerprints found in the book matched Trapel's. The prosecution also presented the tools used to tamper with the Coke bottles, tiny screwdrivers, one of which was missing, perfectly matching the marks left on the bottle caps. This damning evidence left the jury in shock. Throughout the trial, Trapel remained eerily calm and emotionless, sometimes even smiling. His lack of remorse, combined with his calculated actions, revealed a chilling depth of evil. He believed that his superior intelligence gave him the right to decide who deserved to live and who didn't. The trial dragged on for 2 months, but it only took the jury 4 hours to reach a verdict. On March 6, 1991, nearly 2 years after Peggy Carr's tragic death, George Trapel was found guilty on all counts. The court sentenced him to death. With those final words, the defendant, George James Trapel, shall be electrocuted until he is dead. Justice was served for Peggy Carr. Special Agent Susan's relentless dedication, courage, and sacrifice brought a criminal mastermind to justice. She risked everything, putting her life on the line, to ensure that Trapel faced the consequences of his heinous actions. Reflecting on Susan's efforts, one cannot help but admire her bravery. She went above and beyond, ensuring that Peggy's killer was held accountable, earning the gratitude and respect of many who followed the case. The rest of Peggy Carr's family, who had also been poisoned, eventually made full recoveries. However, the loss of Peggy left an indelible mark on her son, Dwayne. Losing his mother at just 16 was a heart-wrenching experience that left him with deep emotional scars. In the years that followed, Dwayne wrestled with his grief, often expressing his pain through anger and outbursts. But amidst the darkness, Dwayne found a way to cope through writing letters to his mother. In one particularly poignant letter, Dwayne poured out his soul. "Dear Mom, this is your baby boy. I'd like to tell you that I love you and I'm sorry for all the bad things I've ever done to you. Hopefully, you're in a better place now. I often think about you and wish you were here. I haven't been so good and I'm sorry. I'll try to get my life straight." Dwayne's heartfelt words were more than just an expression of loss. They were a promise. And over time, he made good on that promise. Today, Dwayne is married and has embraced the role of the father figure his own family deserves. Every day, he lives with the intention of making his mother proud, keeping her memory alive through his actions and the man he's become. Dwayne's journey is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Even after enduring unimaginable tragedy, he has proven that it's possible to rebuild, heal, and live a life that honors those we've lost. Thank you for tuning in to our channel. If you don't want to miss out on more thrilling investigations, be sure to subscribe now.